Tonight, Israel and Iran have resumed trading airstrikes. We'll have more on that evolving situation later in the show. But first, what's the significance of these targets?
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
That claimed obliteration, a steep escalation of the conflict in Iran. American aircraft entering the fray, bombing nuclear sites in Isfahan, Natanz and Fordow.
Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise.
Of those facilities, Fordow is considered the centrepiece of Iran's nuclear program, buried an estimated 90 metres inside a mountain south of Tehran and originally a facility for the Revolutionary Guard. It was converted to a nuclear site in the early 2000s. Its location considered impenetrable to all weapons, save for America's 13-ton bunker buster bombs capable of penetrating 61 metres below the surface before exploding.
Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace.
But Iran has contradicted Trump, saying Fordow has been evacuated and had not suffered irreversible damage, suggesting the nuclear program Israel had been warning of might still be alive.
If not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months.
This is a claim Netanyahu has been making for more than a decade. US intelligence says that while Iran's uranium enrichment was, quote, unprecedented for a state without nuclear weapons, there was no actual evidence any weapon was being built.
The IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003.
That assessment rebuffed by Donald Trump.
Who in the intelligence community said that?
Your Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard.
She's wrong.
Just how far back these bombings will set the country's nuclear program is dividing analysts.
Now, given that those centrifuges were destroyed, their capability to do it in the short term, at least 20 years at this point now, is completely over.
That does not end Iran's nuclear ambitions.
Right.
It just delays them. So a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we're right back in the same place.
So is this really the end of the nuclear threat in Iran or the beginning of a dangerous new chapter?
Well, James Acton is a physicist and co-director of the Nuclear Policy Program at Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. He joins us now. James, is it likely the US has destroyed the Fordow facility?
My only honest answer to that is I don't know. The president has said that the operation was very successful. I would certainly like to wait until we get good satellite imagery and other data in the hours after the sun rises in Iran tomorrow. So I'd actually, I don't think it's too helpful to speculate until we get that more data in.
How important is this particular site to Iran's nuclear program?
Well, in one sense, it's profoundly important. Iran's enrichment facilities at Natanz and at Fordow are the means by which Iran can enrich uranium to the level necessary to build a nuclear weapon. So there's no question that the attack against this facility is a significant setback. On the other hand, Iran does have the ability to reconstitute its program. Components for building centrifuges haven't been monitored by the IAEA since the Iran deal fell apart. Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium may very well have survived this attack. And so my big concern here is that even in spite of the destruction or the probable destruction of Iran's enrichment plants, it will retain the capability to reconstitute its program and build a nuclear weapon.
James, this might be a stupid question, but if you're using nuclear material for civilian purposes, you need plants, you need a lot of stuff in order to create nuclear power. When you're building a bomb, how much space do you need?
Well, not very much. Enrichment plant, which is what is the route that Iran is going down, can be relatively small. They just look from the outside, they can just look like any old industrial facility. Now, in the case of Iran's enrichment plant, they were built underground precisely to try to avoid them being bombed, possibly unsuccessfully. But these are relatively modestly sized facilities. And so looking forward, Iran doesn't need massive industrial scale facilities in order to produce enough highly enriched uranium for a bomb.
Okay, so this is kind of the basis of my question. This attack is not a secret in the sense that it's been building for a while. We had the 2-week deadline, that turned out not to be true, but the idea that an attack was coming is not a new one. If you don't need much space to create a bomb, is it possible Iran would have just moved all or plenty of the nuclear material it had to another location so that this bombing is ineffective?
Yes, absolutely. In the case of Iran's highly enriched uranium, it had built up a stockpile of this material, which is a relatively short step from the level of enrichment needed to build a nuclear weapon. That highly enriched uranium is in a gaseous form that's stored in something that's very much the same size and shape as scuba tanks. These are not physically big objects. Iran could easily have moved this material. We've seen some statements from the Iranians, in fact, saying that they have already moved this material. And precisely because it's carried around in these scuba tank-sized things, it's potentially very difficult to track this material. So I think the concern that today's strike may have been successful in destroying individual facilities, but been unsuccessful in dealing anything close to a fatal blow to the Iranian nuclear program is unfortunately a very realistic fear right now.
Okay, so all that taken into consideration and adding the fact that Iran is a massive country, is there anything that the US or Israel or both together could do to get rid of Iran's nuclear program that doesn't involve a full-scale invasion, troops on the ground and a long-range war that would be, I don't know, something similar to perhaps what we saw in Iraq?
I have to be honest with you. I don't see a good option right now. Prior to the US bombing, I still think there was a possibility of a diplomatic settlement. There was a slim possibility, but it was a real possibility. Now that the United States has attacked Iran this evening, I think the prospects of a diplomatic settlement are out of the window. The option the United States and Iran and Israel now have is to try to detect any reconstitution activities, to periodically attack Iran again and again, what's been euphemistically called mowing the grass. Unfortunately, I don't expect that to succeed. And so, as you say, the only option which I find horrific is the possibility of invading and occupying Iran, which I strongly oppose and which I think is inconceivable.
James, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.